Hey guys, it's Paul of Emerald Enclosures here from the future, 2 weeks in the future to be precise, bringing you the video that you guys voted for, the Duo Spider Paludarium build. This video, I kid you not, it took me about 5 hours to make, and that's not including all the amount of waiting I had to do for certain parts of it to be curing. The tank itself though, the video before I edited it down and sped up certain parts of it literally was like 5-6 hours. Luckily I figured out how to do time skips and I was able to speed up the video by almost 8 times in certain parts. But yeah, I finished and I'm going to give you the step-by-step now on how I did it starting from the very beginning. I hope you guys enjoyed this because I really enjoyed putting this together. It turned out to be a really fun project. And as I said before, this tank is for an avicularia pink toe tarantula and a diving bell spider, but that's only if I can actually find the diving bell spider. I'm having a lot of trouble. At this point, I'm planning on just having maybe some small fish in the meantime until I can find the spider. And that's assuming I ever do. If it takes too long, I may just end up putting shrimp or African dwarf frogs. But anyway, let's get right to it from the beginning. First step here is to outline exactly where the cuts are going to go. I have a couple of different ways I could do the cuts, but I'm going to worry about that after I get the outline done. So what I'm doing here is using another tank to prop up this very large piece of plastic so I can easily measure it out so that there are no errors. Worst thing I would need is errors with this, especially as acrylic is not cheap compared to wood. So what I'll do is take this piece of wood, line it up as well as I can, and run the black line over the part that I plan on destroying, so that the cut comes out as best as it possibly can. And if anyone not familiar with acrylic, there's a sheet of sealant over this, so these black lines won't matter later. And same going this way. I'm a perfectionist, so I just like to make sure that this is perfect as possible. In terms of ways to cut this, I have a Dremel that I could use to cut it out, which is a pretty meticulous way of going about it, and I really don't want to do that. I also have an acrylic cutting table saw, which it's a good way of going about it. It's only this piece is so big. And the last way, actually, now I'm looking at it, that's probably going to be the way that I'm going to go about the acrylic cutting table saw. But the only other way I could do this is by scoring it along the edges and then snapping it off. But this piece is so big and so awkward that I'm thinking the saw is going to be probably the best way of going about it, unless I was able to get a jigsaw or something like that. I don't know. I've been thinking about putting some money into that, so I don't know. The next part you'll see what I decide on. Alright, so I've decided to go with a jigsaw to cut the plastic. I've already cut out the basic frame that I'm going to be working with. And I went and got myself a new jigsaw and an acrylic cutting blade. So I'm not going to show cutting up this entire thing because it's a little bit tedious. But I'm just going to show cutting the line with the jigsaw. It's really not suggested to be doing it this way, but I'm really steady and I've been able to cut nothing but perfect cuts so far, so I'll just show you how this works. It just needs to be done really slowly. There you have it. That's how I go about cutting my acrylic. As I said, it's not perfect, That's good enough for the job. This bottom portion is going to be where the water is, and this is going to be the canopy. So I'm going to get about to cutting this line here, and then 2 holes. Holes I'm going to be doing with a circular saw. So that's basically it for now, and I'll show you the next step in a second. Alright, so I just finished all the cutting, and these are the pieces that I'm left with right now. These 2 holes are going to be for the fans, which I'm going to be mounting. This is the very top part. This part right here is going to be the middle, the door, and this is going to be the bottom. Now, before I connect them, it's extremely important whenever you're using acrylic cement to clean the surfaces so that you get a firm grasp. Dust, dirt, and debris is going to get in the way of the plastic adhering to one another. So that's what I'm going to do before I move on to the next step. Now, the good thing about trying to convert this particular type of cage into an arboreal tank is the fact that this rim here is made of plastic also. So by using the acrylic cement, it should turn it into one solid piece of plastic. It works by loosening the molecular bonds of the plastic and turning 2 pieces literally into one. So it's not really a glue or cement. It's more of fusing 2 separate pieces into one. But next step, I'll show you how that works. Okay, now that I have all the surfaces cleaned up, face mask on, I'd use a wrench to pry this thing open. But I'm going to attempt to apply this acrylic cement on. I didn't order any applicators, so I'm just going to use a paintbrush. I'm marking this out with tape so I can see when I could stop. After I'm done with this, it's going to take at least a full 24 hours before I'll be able to mess with it again. So what I'll just do, just paint around the corners wherever the plastic is going to meet. Also, this stuff stinks a bit. Definitely nothing that you're going to want to inhale if you ever try making a tank like this. So do yourself a favor and wear a face mask. Oh, and don't mind the music. I had to open up my window because I don't want the fumes building up in here. And my neighbor likes to listen to loud music. Like, all the time. It's a little bit of a hassle. Hopefully, this bind is so strong on the bottom that I'm not going to have to worry about there being much leakage. Apparently this stuff, if done correctly, is better than silicone when it comes to waterproofing. Okay. So, just place it on. I'm thinking about it. I should really be wearing gloves right now. This should appear to be solid when pushed down. I'm going to put some clamps on here just to make sure that it is. Anyway, that is generally what you do with particular applicant. The next part I'm going to be going over is attaching the door handle with this. And just going around the corners here, making sure it's a nice solid connection. Luckily, just based on trying this for the first time, with the 16 fluid ounce container, it's going to last me a very long time. A little bit more right there. Anyway, I'm going to be connecting the bottom, and then I will be getting back to you guys. So, hold on. Also taking the opportunity while this acrylic, just making sure that the spacing is right. Well, the acrylic holding the frame together is drying. Figured I'd work on attaching these acrylic hinges that I bought also. That's how I'm going to be attaching the door handles. And everything can just be connected by this adhesive. And again, I should really be wearing gloves right now, but I'm not. Okay. Not the cleanest job, but works. Right about there. I love how cleanly this stuff attaches. There we go. And yeah, so far I really like this stuff. Use a little tape there, keep it in place. Actually, I could just use the tape to figure out exactly where it's going to go. And then maybe use the tape once I attach the adhesive. Right along there. But a scarce amount. I don't want any seeping into the hinges because then I'm going to have some serious issues after that. Trying to open or close this thing. Stuff really does set fast. I don't need to actually put any tape on this to keep it in place. Now, just attach the next hinge. Music is a real bother. That sets so fast, I love it. Okay. After this, I'll just have to attach the door. But I don't want... You know, I really don't think I actually would have a problem attaching the door right now. Just need to be... No, it's a better idea to wait, because there's a little bit of adhesive in the corners here, and I don't want the door getting completely attached. Okay, so I will continue this video in about 24 hours, so until then. What I ended up doing last night was attaching the fans and putting a little bit of mesh in between them. That way that anything that's in the tank that's large or small or anything really, I mean, I don't want anything to get skewered by the fan. It was a little bit difficult because of how this was attached. I had to position it just right, and then I used my Dremel here to drill out 2 holes. Had to widen them a little bit, and then I attached the fans using that method. I also went back and I finished attaching the hinges to the cover piece. And I attached the hasp and clasp to the top. That way that if I ever wanted to lock the cage for whatever reason, I can do so. So far it's looking pretty solid. The only thing I still have to do is cut down these screws a little bit. That way they don't poke anything, and also just so they're not hanging out. Kind of looks cruddy. But you can see better on this side that I put a mesh. That'll stop anything from getting hurt. And the part that I'm going to be working on next is going to be waterproofing the bottom of the tank, which you can see right here, with silicone. Just a little bit of extra protection in case there's any sort of leak. But I'll show you how I'll be doing that in a second. What I'm going to be doing now is using this aquarium safe silicone. Make sure that if you ever do anything like this, you actually use aquarium safe silicone. And I'm going to be putting an extra layer of sealant around the corners here just so that water can't escape. Honestly, I think it's probably going to be fine with the acrylic cement that I already used, but I just want to be sure. That way I don't have any surprises down the line. So I just have some leftovers from this small tube. Dab a little bit. I'm going to try and keep as much off the glass as I can. And I'm just going to be filling in the corners here. I'd rather it look a little funky than there being any sort of accidents later with water escaping. just for the sake of the creatures inside. Hopefully it won't look that terrible, I think. Now it's important when you do this, you make sure you get a truly minimum amount on the actual acrylic, because good luck getting that off. Silicone adheres pretty strongly to plastics, but it doesn't adhere that strong to glass. You could always scratch off silicone when it touches the glass. So just make sure when you're going around corners like that, just to be extremely careful. I sealed up the additional areas around the frame and the glass just because at this part of the tank right here is not meant for actually holding water. So I'm just trying to be sure that there's no leakages. Okay. So chances are, after I let this dry, maybe 24 to 48 hours, just to be sure that it's completely waterproof, I'll actually begin starting to put the tank together. Although, still thinking I should probably put an alcove right here, which I'll probably be cutting out of acrylic, and I'll be attaching to the frame or to the glass the same way that I did this. So if I decide to do that, that will be the next part of the video that you'll be watching. Anyway, stay tuned for that. Alright, so I just finished my water test. As you can see here, I went a little bit higher actually than I actually plan on going with my tank when it's completed. Kind of right up to the bottom of the hinges there. But I let it sit for approximately 18 hours and there is no leakage. I really love this acrylic cement. It made a perfect bond. It's something that I never always got with the silicone. But even so, that there was a layer of silicone on the inside just to be sure. I know it looks a little bit messy right now, but what I'm going to do is going to put some tape along here, along the corners. On the the tape is going to be on the inner side so that this is exposed, and I'm just going to paint over it with some black paint. Make it look a little bit more professional. But now I'm going to get to draining this tank so I can start working on the next part, which is going to be probably foaming and attaching the canopy. I'll see you then. Now I know it's a little bit dark and harder to see because of the lighting in my basement, but what I'm doing right now is I am submerging the pieces of bark, branch, and wood, whatever I plan on using inside the spider tank. That way that I can get off any sort of parasites. Pretty much I'm just drowning the logs. I kind of feel bad about it. I'm sure that there are a lot of isopods and springtails in there, but there could also be some more detrimental creatures. And also I'm giving a chance for the tannins to kind of get worked out of the log. Though I'd probably have to boil it to get more of it out, but this is what I'm doing for now. And the weights are just to keep it down because they'll float, and I don't want anything to hang around any longer because it got a little spot for a reprieve. As you can see here, I cut out a piece of plastic which is going to act as a divider between the aquatic and the arboreal portions of this tank. Maybe pushing it down a little bit and siliconing it in place so it doesn't move. It'll keep part of the humidity out of the top, which is good because the tarantula should only have a certain amount of humidity. I heard with avicularia tarantulas, if they... you can't see her very well right now when the lights went off. But I heard with avicularia tarantulas, eating a cricket right now, that if the humidity gets too high, they could grow mold in their lungs and they could die from that. So I didn't want to chance that. So it's really serving two purposes. One, keeping the spiders separate, and two, it is keeping the humidity down in the upper portions. But either way, there are going to be fans to help with that. Okay, so I used a little bit more of my acrylic cement, and I fashioned the divider and glued the hatch to the top. That way I'll be able to access the bottom water area whenever I need to. Nothing too fancy, it's just a matter of using the cotton swab to do so. And the next part is going to be of me attaching the hatch or divider to the cage. Alright, now I got this thing leveled out with this roll of wire and toilet paper. No one judge me on that. When you're working, you just got to use whatever you got. Now I'm just unscrewing the screw here from the end of the silicone, and I'm going to silicone this thing in place. It'll be covered up by the foam when it's all done, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be creating like a ledge here with foam, and then it's going to make a little like of a bowl that's going to hold the soil. Okay, there goes the silicone. Too much shine. So, I'm just going to create a seal for this. I probably could put a layer on the bottom too, but I'm going to try and keep to just the top so the bottom looks a little bit less mucked up. I don't think I'm going to be putting a background on this on the water portion, but the background is only going to be on the land portion. Nice and easy. And then throughout the back. And after this is done, there's another 24-hour wait. Or technically, a couple of hours. Until it solidifies enough where I could start working on the foam. But I like to be sure. It's probably going to be another 24-hour wait before I start filming again. Sadly, outside, my pieces of log got drenched in the rain, so it's going to take even more time for them to dry off now. What can you do? I'm just going to smooth this out with my hand. God, this stuff reeks of vinegar. little bit more came out. I'll just put it right over here. Just a smidgen. And this should be good now. Now, just continue. Should have rolled up my sleeves. Just smooth it out. I want to try and keep as much of the mucked up soil as I possibly can out of the water portion. I mean, it should work as industrial grade fertilizer being mixed up with worm compost, the water being having worm compost in it, but I still want to be able to control that amount a little bit more. And all of this is going to be covered up with foam, as I said, so it doesn't need to be perfect. That should pretty much do it. Once it solidifies, it'll be nice and strong. I'm deciding if I should leave this portion open so there is a little bit of condensation buildup in the top area. But I'm not entirely sure. I have time to figure that out. So I'll just leave it like this for now. I'm going to try and also find a little bit of a knob so I can pick this up easier without having to run a piece of plastic or a credit card underneath here. But the next part of this is going to be the foaming. As I said, I'm going to try and make a very thin layer of foam here and cut it out. Well, technically, I guess I should do the start putting the background pieces in, and then I'll do the foam section, just in case it gets a little tall. But the soil portion, it's not going to be very tall at all. But anyway, I'll get to that in the next part. Okay, so shortly, I'm about to start foaming this piece of log into place, along with these other pieces of bark that I've collected. One thing that I like to do, especially with strangely shaped pieces like this particular piece of bark here, is I like to mark out exactly where it's going to sit. So I always take a piece of tape and put it over that and just line it up, the contour of the bark. Just when I'm putting this thing, if I have to move it, if I have to move it, I can put it back exactly as it was. Just as a guide. I'll do this one off camera because I don't want to mess this up. If I get the Sharpie on it, then that's it. There's no possible way I'm getting it off. If you get the idea. And once I'm secure in having this exactly where I want it, I will begin the foaming. Okay, so I think I figured out what I'm going to be doing in terms of the hardscaping. I grabbed a very thin piece of bark and I wrapped it around the back of this nice piece of bark that I've really grown to like. And yeah, I think it'll look really nice once it's done. It'll have a little bit more of a naturalistic look as opposed to just blackness. So you'll see bark on the other side of this bark. And the only other thing I was playing around with was this piece of bark here. I'm not sure if I'm going to go with that, but it's an option. I was thinking about maybe trying to cook the tannins out of this and make this a continuation on the bottom. 1 second. Make this a continuation because this is the bottom part of this nice piece of bark right here. So I was thinking about just putting it down on the other side. Not sure how I'd go about that. It's just an option. That way it looks like one homogeneous piece. Chances are, though, I'm going to leave it out so that the spider will have more space to itself up here. But anyway, I'm going to start getting to the foaming process. I have all day off today, so I want to get as much done as I possibly can. This entire back side, well, this is a side, but the other back I'm also going to be painting with black paint, so none of these empty parts are even going to be noticeable. I just feel like it's unnecessary to make it solid. Okay. So I'm going to let this dry for now. Oh. I'm going to let this dry for now so that I don't get any of this foam on the nice live moss that's still on here. And then once it does, I'm going to cut it down a little bit, shape it, and then yeah, might as well. And then I'm going to silicone some of the cocoa fiber and substrate that I have to this so that it'll absorb a little bit more water and it'll give it a surface area for plants to kind of dig their roots into. But once this is all dry, then I will attempt to, well, not attempt, I could do it very easily. I will attach this piece of bark over it. But I'm not going to do that until then, because I want to leave all the foam off of this area. I'll just leave it open if I need to, just a little bit. I'm sure the tarantula's not going to mind. And after that, I'll do the sides. Okay, so it's been about 3 hours now, and it appears that the foam has dried enough for me to start cutting grooves into it. This is important for a couple of reasons. One, you're shaping it to be the shape that you need it to be. Aesthetically, sometimes it's better if it takes up less space. And two, when I start siliconing this, I need it to take up less space. Well, I mean, not when I start siliconing this, the silicone adheres better to the foam after it's cut to shape a little bit more. Okay, everything's all sculpted now, and it'll be ready to be siliconed. I just need to set up my tools and make a foam call, and then I will show you how that goes. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a little bit of how I go about adding substrate to the walls, as I'm not going to be adding much to this. Pretty much only the inside of the log, because that's the part that's going to be... No dogs. Sorry, I heard my dogs whining downstairs. Mailman's probably here. Anyway, I'm going to be adding a little bit of silicone to the inside here. That way I can increase the amount of moisture absorption, as this is the area that I'm not going to be able to easily get to once I'm done installing the cover of the log. Okay, oh, got a little bit on me. Not a big deal. The foam is worse if you were to get it on you. Now, I'm just going to switch these gloves because this one isn't as bad as the other one. And I'm going to just put on the substrate before this stuff dries too much. My substrate is a combination of cocoa coir, leaves, sphagnum moss, little bits of granulated gravel, when it comes to leaves, I typically only use oak leaves. Or any other kind of any leaves that come from hardwood trees. Reason being, it's more like a slow release food source, and it doesn't release any sort of toxins, like with, say, maple wood when it breaks down. Now, if you were to do this yourself, pack in the substrate as much as you can. And don't worry about putting too much. You could just vacuum the rest off or collect it and save it for later. After I'm done with this, I'll probably leave it for a few hours, let it dry some more before I continue my work. Just make sure the foam is up to snuff. Alright, that's enough for now. I will come back to this in a couple of hours. Try and get rid of the rest of the loose substrate that didn't attach to the log through the silicone. And then I'll probably place on the cover piece of the log. Alright, I turned it upwards, did a little bit of vacuuming, and I cleaned off all the extra substrate that didn't attach with the silicone. But as you can see, it basically covered up all the black on the inside, And now that there's this nice plushy absorbent interior. Now I was actually just thinking about covering the whole thing with silicone, doing the exact same thing, but I wanted to look more naturalistic. And it wouldn't look naturalistic if the inside of a log, or yeah, a log would be so dirt filled. Alright, so the next part, now that that's out of the way, is to place the next pieces of log in that are going to be overlaying it. While it was added before, I cut down a little bit of the log that was on the side here. I want this to look like it's one solid piece. And that little bit of extra kind of just messed with that idea. And looks about right. So you can see, I turned 4 separate pieces of bark. Well, not yet, but the idea is to turn 4 separate pieces of bark into one solid piece of bark that'll give a hide for any sort of creature. In this circumstance, it's going to be a tarantula. I might try and get another piece of bark to fill in this side, but for now, I don't need to worry about that. Instead, I will just worry about what I have to work with at the moment. I think I'm going to leave this part exposed here so I don't mess with any of this moss. It grew in so nicely I don't want to damage it. So what I think I'm going to do, just by putting a little bit of foam along there. Just need my pair of scissors. I'm going to get started on that now. This should work for now. Just gotta wait a couple of hours for the foam to dry. And then I will treat it the same way that I did the inside of the log, with silicone and substrate to give it a more naturalistic look. Just need to tidy up one little spot here, and I'll see you guys in a bit. I got a little overzealous and I planted these before I actually remembered that I need to be recording this. But this here is Ficus pumila, also known as creeping fig. And I didn't realize I actually had a ton of it in my backyard. So everyone, you can ignore that Instagram post. Basically, I didn't know that Ficus pumila was the scientific name of creeping fig. I knew I had Ficus pumila, but there you go, that's the whole thing. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to keep the Ficus pumila up front. I'm going to hope that this covers up this hole over here, and then maybe it covers up the top. If it's just as profoundly growing as I think it is and have I've heard, it should pretty much take over the entire bottom portion and top portion of this tank. I'm also going to be throwing some moss throughout. But I'm thinking I'm also going to go with this bromeliad here. It's not that big right now, but its pups should be the right size for me to separate them. I'm thinking I'm going to drill some holes with the Dremel into the background. I'm just going to plant it in and hope for the best. Okay, so I didn't go about recording me separating all these smaller bromeliads from this parent bromeliad, because if you really wanted me to see that, all you'd have to do is watch my other video about bromeliad propagation. Though I think I'm going to move this Ficus pumila a little bit and stick the parent right here. It's not that rooted in right now, so it's not that big of a deal. And this one I'll keep on the ground, like it's pretty much used to at this point. And for anyone who doesn't know, bromeliads are epiphytes. So they are, in nature, usually growing on the surfaces of other plants, like trees, dead rotting logs, whatever they may find. I mention this because that's what I'm going to be doing with the pups. I'm going to be drilling holes throughout this log. You know, honestly, I maybe should have just left the Ficus pumila there. Oh well, doesn't matter. I'll just roll it into the back. I think that looks nice. I don't think I'm going to be putting any real plants here, just because of how shallow the dirt is. But it's a start. Anyway, I'm going to get back to it. Alright, that looks good for now. Hopefully when they grow in, they'll move out a little bit more if they need more space for their roots. God damn it. Looks pretty good. This is pretty much it in terms of the plant life for this tank. I don't think I'm going to be adding anything else. So, next up, whenever the foam and the silicone on the bottom of the tank gets done curing, I will be beginning to work on the water portion of this tank, but after I add some springtails and isopods, this will be pretty much done on top. Okay, so I did add the springtails and isopods, and if anyone wants to know what they look like, be sure to check out my Detriivores video. For now, land portion is done. I don't have anything else to add to it. I had to speed up the making of this a little bit because the moss in the back looked like it was starting to dry out a bit, and I didn't want it to completely die or anything like that. So did what I had to do. Even still, it looks a little bit yellow and unhealthy, but I'm hoping that it bounces back. Everything else is done, and I'm planning on ending this video here and making a second part entitled Finishing the Aquatic Section. This video is already over an hour long, so I don't want to make it last any longer than necessary, along with the fact that I don't want to rush this and mess up anything. So that is basically it for this video. I didn't realize how much time I actually put into making this thing until I actually watched the video. It's like, took around 5 hours in total, not to mention all the time that I had to put into just waiting. But once I'm certain that the bottom portion of this tank is done curing, I will get to recording my adding of any sort of wildlife and water and whatnot. So stay tuned, guys, for the next video update. It's probably going to be next week. I don't think that it's going to take any longer than that. So please like and subscribe. And if you actually watched the entire video, thank you very much. Or even if you just skipped ahead, I don't blame you. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed what you see, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.